So, I'm here with my first message, which is to say, parenting has never been easy, but as some of you might have heard me say before, I think it's gotten a whole lot harder in the past decade. And a big part of the increased challenge has to do with electronics and social media that permeate our lives and potentially the lives of your children. The good news and the bad news is that the elementary years are relatively the easiest. Notice I didn't say actually easy, I just said relatively easy. Over this next hour, I'm going to do a whirlwind tour of some big topics. We'll take some questions you might have across a range of parenting with tech, and time permitting, we'll split into some discussion later on. So you can talk to and hear from each other, and since we have a smaller group, we might just stay here, but I want to make sure to answer your questions and then also have some time to talk with each other. One big idea that I'm hoping you leave here with is that it's far too easy in discussions around kids with tech to feel guilt. As someone who studies the issue pretty intensely, I can tell you that we don't know more than we do know. If you look at what happened with television as a comparison, it took really 20 to 30 years after mass popularization of TV before there was a body of research around its effects on children. So we've got a long way to go with social media in our digital age. So we need to try and let go of the guilt that is all too easy to feel around these tech issues as long as your family is making reasonable decisions. And in my time here at PBS, most families are making reasonable decisions, right? So screen time is a good example of the range of reasonable decisions. Families that choose to have no screen time at all should feel fine about this. The kids aren't going to be left behind in the job market 15 years from now because they didn't use technology at home at this age. Families that allow screen time shouldn't feel like their kids are about to be turned into digital zombies. In her book, The Art of Screen Time, How Your Family Can Balance Digital Media in Real Life, Anya comments, I adapt some advice from Michael Pollan in a way that I think makes a lot of sense. Enjoy screens, not too much, mostly with others. Now, if your kid is not going to get into Stanford or not get into Stanford because of what they do on a particular Saturday. So if they spend all day on one Saturday, that's going to be fine. If they spend no time, right, that's going to be great too. But helping your child learn how to balance activities on screen and off is going to help you with the much harder conversations that will occur around these kinds of topics when they get into their tween and teen years. Just like so much in parenting, how you role model technology is going to be nearly as important as the conversations you have. Dana Boyd, who has done among the most comprehensive research and rigorous research around teen use, has some great suggestions for parents of elementary age children about how they can act as good role models. Harking back to the no guilt mantra, Boyd suggests that rather than abstaining from technology around kids, the most important thing you can do at this age is verbalize how you're using technology. For instance, Mama's trying to figure out how long it'll take to get to Bobby's house. Want to look at the map with me? Or, Dad wants to take a picture of you. Is that okay? In 5 minutes, I'm going to have to respond to a work email, and then we'll go back outside. Mommy needs a break and wants to read the headlines of the New York Times. Do you want me to read them to you? Papa got a text message from Grandma and needs to respond. Should I tell her something from you too? It might not always be realistic to relate it back to your child as in these examples, but just verbalizing how and when you're using technology will not only help your child understand it, but will help you be purposeful in your use around them. This advice gets to the most important thing that you can be doing as a parent now and into their tween and hopefully even teen years. That is having regular conversations with your children about their digital lives. Find out what YouTube channels they're watching or games they're playing. If you were here last week, Dana Blum talked about how middle and high school students are more likely to talk to a tech director or advisor when something happens online to them. Having been a tech director at a K-12 school, I can tell you that this is true, but it doesn't have to be. Just by listening, you'd be amazed at what you can learn. And once you hear about something that your child is doing, you can educate yourself about that thing. This is a place where I wish there was a shortcut given how busy everyone is, but there really isn't. It's worth putting in some time here. Fortunately, the internet can be your ally. Besides Common Sense Media, another organization that really is helpful in learning is the Family Online Safety Institute. There's no shame in doing a Google search also for what is, insert the name of the app. In this way, you can learn about apps or other technology your child might be asking to use. You should know that if using a specific piece of technology is important to your child, that you're fighting an asymmetrical war. You can say no a whole bunch of times, but your child really only needs you to say yes just once. So go ahead and get ahead of the game. Figure out what and when you're willing to say yes to, but also remember that ultimately you have the knowledge and perspective your child doesn't have. And so you're going to be able to see that bigger picture and figure out the right method and ideas for your child and your family. It's okay to hold the line in a way that helps promote your family's values. Another idea is to think about where tech contracts could help you set appropriate boundaries and reinforce those family values. When doing a tech contract with your child, whether over a device like a game system or a phone or an app like YouTube, I would suggest it's important that the contract be written in two ways, both what you're going to do and what your child is going to do or not do. And maybe even to get your child's input. So for instance, with a video game, the parent might promise to listen carefully if the child experiences something upsetting, while the child promises to tell their parents if that upsetting thing happens. Both Common Sense Media and FOSI offer sample contracts that you can customize based on your family's values and who your child is. My final thought is to remember that for no PBS-age child is it too late to set good digital habits. So if you decide you want to make a change around technology, you can. It might not be easy, but remember what I said before about how parenting is hard now? You can do it. So that's my whirlwind 20,000-foot overview. I want to remind you that part of my job here is to help all of you. So if you're ever wanting to know about something or need a tech perspective, know that I'm here to help all of you. I want to open the floor to questions, not only about these particular topics or my gather topics, but also much more nitty-gritty how-to type questions. If I can't answer them for you now, I'll be happy to find or make some high-quality resources to help you. Or we can just talk about what you're doing at home. I know some of you have participated in these kinds of conversations before, but I think it's valuable to hear from others and hopefully get the information or tip that a group like this can offer.
So, I know about concepts we talked about. It's the first time I've heard about the family.
Online safety.
Online safety. So can you tell us a little? Maybe everybody knows about it.
No, so I have to tell you that I hadn't really heard about them until I had the chance to participate in a digital citizenship summit that Google put together in the late summer in August. And they were one of the groups that was invited in there. And they're an organization that really has evolved over the years. So they kind of started in the 90s as a, your child's about to get kidnapped online, group, right? But in the somewhere over those last 20 years, they've really kind of evolved, and so it's still about promoting those kinds of safe habits. But they've done a lot more around kind of general topics. And one thing that they have that I think is really nice is around a lot of apps, they have a really nice one-page summary of kind of what those apps are, and so it's going to be the most common ones, right? And there's always going to be a lag time. So so when some big new app pops up, it's going to take them 6 to 9 months to kind of get there, but kind of gives you a quick summary and some bullet point tips. So I think that it's just another place to look.
Favorite filtering software?
I almost actually put a hidden slide just because I thought this might be a question. I think there's a couple out there. So one, I think looking at filtering at the router level, right, where your internet comes in, is much more effective than filtering at the device level. And so the one that I like best on that level is called Circle by Disney. So it's actually owned by Disney, and lets you kind of set up bedtimes and will also filter particular content areas. It's called Circle by Disney, yeah. And then Norton's, in terms of more software-based, Norton's is kind of the software-based one that is best reviewed. I don't have personal experience with that, so I really am kind of relying the massive critical reviews out there. So, but the big thing about filters is that even a motivated sixth grader is going to be able to start getting around them, right? And so, so it's not to say don't have filters, but no filter is perfect, and and you have to be careful because you don't want to be playing the game of of kind of encouraging your child to beat you, and then you have to be smart. You get into kind of unhealthy rather than a positive sort of dynamic with them around these issues. So I think filtering can absolutely be important and a helpful tool, but having those kind of conversations and structures so that they've internalized what they should be doing, and maybe the filters there just kind of as the reminder if they are tempted to stray, is going to be the best kind of combination there.
I guess I would add, just because
Please.
I have elementary school,
Yeah.
middle school, and high school, so I'm kind of seeing the
Yeah.
range in my own house at the moment. I think a lot of the kids, if we're in a community like this, even when they're older, are not necessarily seeking out dangerous content. It doesn't mean that it's not coming at them. And so that, I think, is kind of, from my perspective, it's not about trying to keep them from doing nefarious things, but just to, once the child sees something, you can't unsee it.
Yeah.
And there's some pretty disturbing stuff out there.
Yeah. So in the past year, there's actually been quite a good. There's been a couple of formal studies, and then quite a bit of reporting around how pornography is affecting our children, right? And by high school, it is shockingly prevalent. But some of the reporting suggests that by 5th grade, about half of children have experienced pornographic images, and that's, and I don't know how that plays out in in a child like in a school like PBS. But that was a really upsetting statistic to me, and it speaks to they're not. I mean, a 5th grader or 4th grader or 3rd grader is not seeking out that image, those images in any sort of ways. But a lot of harmless searches can lead down that rabbit hole. So that is absolutely where a filter can be helpful. Yeah.
Is there guidance also on if that happens, like what is the best way to respond to it? What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, so you might have heard me talk. I mean, I think the idea of broaching it as if something upsetting happens online, you want to be able to kind of build up that trust. And so that upsetting thing could, I mean, kids are upset by that, right? Because they know that it just doesn't feel right. But that upsetting thing could be, a hurtful comment that someone says, or if they're playing Minecraft and someone, vandalizes their bit, right? And upsetting covers kind of a wide range of activities. And so that's the initial frame that I'd like to encourage families to try and do, because that kind of opens up the door to a wide range. I think it's important that when your child comes to you to listen and just help them kind of process through and kind of check in with them about that. And then kind of say, there's stuff on the internet is, there's a lot of adult stuff on there, and that was kind of an adult piece, and I'm sorry you saw that, and I know, validate what they're feeling, right? And so if they said that they were scared or angry or confused, right, to validate whatever kind of emotion or language that they might have done, and said, that isn't something that you need to be seeing now, and I'm sorry you saw that, and let's kind of talk about how we can avoid that, again, or what kind of led up to it, so that we can help you so that you don't have to feel that again, right? And again, that is a place where having the filter on there, right? Image recognition has gotten better and better, and a lot of these filters now are starting to incorporate that, so that just like Google, you can type in a tree, and Google has machine learned what a tree looks like. Pornography is pretty easy to machine learn, and so a lot of the good filters now are incorporating that kind of machine learning into them, so that even if a particular image hasn't been, previously identified, the filter might be able to guess that that's what that is about to be. Please.
This happened to one of Sarah's cousins, and I now have a cache of books about like boys' bodies and girls'
Yeah.
bodies in a book that's called My Body Is Mine. And I haven't actually looked at them with her, but I have them like on standby for when she comes home and says, I saw blank. Because even when we're controlling it at home, it was on somebody's phone that somebody had, like on a playground. We just don't. So I kind of look at my standby. I'll give you those titles if you want. And I have kind of like a standby cache for the redirect, right? And it's an opportunity for conversation, but it's also maybe an opportunity for like the sex ed world rather. But so I feel slightly comforted by having my cache of books.
It's a great idea.
And just the title, your body is your own. It feels like a kind of anecdote, it's like, so, just that idea, I think, that's super standard. So can I
Please.
question too? So after the talk last week, Sarah said, and I felt the same way, she told me that screens were bad, but she didn't say why they're bad. And this is a kind of a conversation I feel like I'm failing right now with Sarah, because we really draconianly limited her screen time. We're trying to like ease into the world. And she asks really good questions, like, well, the minute somebody says pangolin, and I say, I have no idea what pangolin is, I grab my phone and I go and I look up pangolin and I show her the image, but then she like, Mom, I want to watch video. I'm like, oh, no, we're not watching video right now. And so I am totally, and I think that a little bit our culture is influencing about this right now. It's like it's all on which things, like good things about the internet and bad things about the internet. But like, do you have advice about like how I can articulate to a 6-year-old? We all have very precocious, 6 or whatever, fill in the number year-olds, that like what the danger is. And I loved your talk today in the sense that people are trying to trick you. And at first I was like, yikes. And I was like, no, that's right. Like she does need to understand that. So do you have other ideas about language for that?
Yeah. I mean, I think part of it, I would echo back to that idea that Dana Boyd is doing about really verbalizing your own usage, right? And
so we're describing for this is what we
right, this is what we're doing, right? And saying, I don't know what a pangolin is, let's look it up together, right? And then just to kind of own and say, I think for the places that wherever you choose to draw that line, right? So if you're drawing the line at videos, and just kind of be willing to say, when we use something together, that feels okay. And there's a lot of stuff with videos, and I don't know what's going to kind of happen there, and so we can enjoy different elements of it, right? And so some of it's about focusing on the positive, but just to kind of say, there's things that are not for 6-year-olds, and I don't know what all of those are, and so I'd rather be a little safe, a little cautious, right? And I think safety, especially in 5, 6, 7-year-old, that idea of safety is a really important one, and really all the way through the elementary and all the way through high school, safety is hugely important. But I think safe is a real word that will resonate with your K1 tour.
Is there any talk about the physical effects, like it's not good for you physically, or does that?
Yeah, I think you have to judge. No, I think you have to judge your kid, right? So in my Gather talk, I was trying to hint at what happened, like the online addiction, right? So that with the apps that are trying to get you to come back to them, that's how they addict you, right? Is that it's not only I'm going to use it for this time, but when I walk away, like what it's going to be, and Dana last week talked about Instagram and Snapchat and the Snapchat stories. I know multiple kids who paid a sibling when they were at summer camp to keep their streaks going, right? That's the extent to which it's important, is that even though that they weren't physically there, that the social dynamic was such that and I know of one situation where both sides were paying their sibling, right? And so neither kid was actually keeping that streak going, but that was that was there. And so I think kind of just talking about tips and tracks and that I think 3rd, 4th grade, the idea of introducing addiction is an appropriate time to start kind of easing into that concept. And certainly by 5th grade, the idea of saying that that's really what they're trying to do. But that's why I use terms like capture your attention, right, and trick you. So those are kind of some of the ways that I would phrase it, or make you do things that you, make you stop thinking, right? I think I mentioned that before. I think that's another kind of phrase that you can use, because they're trying to get you to, a lot of these apps, right? They've, you know, what we've seen with Facebook and some of the revelations that have been coming out in the last couple of weeks, right? That they're the ways that they're trying to capture attention in really subtle ways, and they have extension, they have PhDs, they have, you know, they have extra knowledge that isn't out in the kind of public sphere, both through the use of their platform and then their own kind of internal research. So they know things, and I think it's okay to kind of be upfront and say these companies, you know, might seem really good, but they're looking out for the companies, and I'm looking out for you. So I hope that's helpful.
I heard some wisdom from a first grader the other day. They were doing some, which I often do, they were doing kind of a project that was like a STEM-oriented project. And they said, oh, I used to think that technology was just like being on an iPad, but now it's like making things. Like you can make things, like you can make robots and you can make things. So I think for the early, a few times I've seen children who have been attracted to devices be very positively redirected towards creation and building. And I think that it was very developmentally appropriate, and they were like, oh, but it wasn't that they suddenly didn't want to use a device, it was more that they saw it was a broadening. You could almost see their understanding broadening. It was pretty cool.
And that's one thing about, I would say, about why we've chosen to adopt iPads, right, in 3rd through 5th, is because they're not computers, but they offer the ability to do creation a lot more. And so that choice was made before I got here, but is one that I think is really, you know, it kind of fits our PBS ethos, and I think we're looking at ways of you know, that's one of the things I've been proud of the growth that we've seen this year, and I think we're going to continue to see growth and kind of finding more of those ways to try and see them, have them use technology as a tool, but as creators, right? And that creativity and capturing all of that, I think, is one of the big reasons that we use an iPad versus a Chromebook or a MacBook or, you know, some other more computer type form.
So I'm just, when you said the handle example, I've been personally struggling, trying to not pull out to answer a question immediately like that, because it's one of those scenarios where when we grew up, you know, you have to wait until you got home to look at a dictionary and Wikipedia,
Or find
which
someone
were sitting there,
who,
right, whatever it was.
Yeah.
So, you know, whether it's responding immediately to a text or thinking, oh, I have the answer right here. It's one of those things that I'm currently struggling with, and poor George, we can write out George. George is like the first one to pull it out and immediately answer, and we don't have technology at the table, but he will stand up and wait a minute, let me just feel it. Or ask Alexa or whatever. So it's one of those scenarios around helping to train ourselves.
But you know, I think that that's where you have to be careful with absolutism, right? Because if you're using the device as part of the natural conversation, right? You use the device for 30 seconds and then the device goes back away. It's not capturing your attention, it's continuing whatever, you know, flow you have. And so I think there's a way to do it without kind of feeling like, oh man, we're violating these boundaries, right? Because the focus really is still on the other people that you're spending the time with and what that was. It just happens that you have an extra tool now, right? So in the past, if someone was just really good at bar trivia and they were sitting at the table, maybe they already know what a pangolin is, right? And they could just kind of say it, and now you have that really kind of knowledgeable friend in your pocket that you can find quickly. And if you don't find it quickly, you put it away and say, well, we'll have to look at it later, right? So kind of putting I try, in my own experience, I try and put it like a 30-second time limit, that if I can find it in 30 seconds, then it's still part of the flow. And if I can't, it just goes back away and we move on.
So that's about this common question that I think I asked you before, and I continue, I'm just curious about it, is that, you know, before, if you didn't know a word or you didn't know what something was, you looked it up in the dictionary and encyclopedia, and we don't even have that at our house, right? Well, I have a dictionary, but it's, I guess the question is that what's lost, right? Because, I mean, you had to learn how to find it in the encyclopedia or the dictionary. You had to look it up. You had to read it. Yeah. I mean, there were all these things that you were doing as a kid when those scenarios came up because you wanted to know what X was or the definition of Y was, right? And I'm just curious if what, are they still gonna learn to look things up? Are we just deciding that that's not necessary, or are we using some other thing that we're giving them to learn the same skills? I guess that, in, technology in the classroom, I guess I'm just trying to, I'm wondering what the thinking is on that, and whether the general thinking is that there are things that they're losing, that they should know how to do, that's now being replaced by, yes, it's quicker, it's faster, it's easier, and that's great too. I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just trying to.
I think the world's changed. I mean, I'm not sure they're going back to, I can go back to the dictionary, that's probably not happening when you're using the future, that's where it's a tool, you use it and you put it down. Which is, you driving us, so Facebook is not a good fast tool, it's really good to use freedom of fiction. And it's just driving us instead of us using it as a tool to pick up and use. But that's how I would approach it. It's forcing us to burn our attention, and that's driving us versus us using it as a tool to drive it. That's how I found out. And like using dictionaries or encyclopedia or Wikipedia is the current form of the encyclopedia. We're all very right with our hands on it. People are like learning it. I just think it still has like a nature of like being a massive game. It's great. You just thumb through it. You go look up one thing and you spend 3 hours on it. And you just randomly do different things. I think the world has changed, but the nature of it is so similar. You still say divine, whatever the word is, just a tool is just a little different.
The difference is that I'm going on the phone and looking it up and telling her what it is, as opposed to her having
That's
to
true.
go through that process and having to, maybe get help reading or, I just feel like it's a different, and it's not that I'm all for the technology, I think it's great, it makes life easier. I just wonder, in some cases, are certain skills being lost or not used, and are we okay with that as educators, and then, or are we replacing it, like what, in a different way?
No, please.
I know this is where lots of different pieces of this. I think what I love about this school is that we try to be really thoughtful about that, and I think that a lot of the foundational skills, especially in the lower grades, retrieval is a really important part of getting something from short-term memory into long-term memory, some of those foundational skills that contribute to reading and number sense and all that. So we don't want to take away those opportunities for kids to be, retrieving, see, like, ooh, wait, so that's still very, very present in like every moment of every day practically, in the way that we teach. But I have seen technology be integrated in a way that's really meaningful when the kids are doing, say, animal research, for example. And they can, if it's the right site that's been curated by our tech team and our teachers, they can go and find some information that they probably wouldn't have been able to find in a way that they would be able to sustain the stamina to find it when they're in their younger grades.
Yeah.
So I think if it's used in that way and matched with that other piece where they're still constantly, puzzling and trying to solve something, and what would be the best way? Is that the same thing? And just all that kind of questioning and rich discussion, if that's present, and then technology is used to match up with that intentionally, I think we're still in a really pretty good place overall.
And let me just kind of expand.
Yeah,
I agree. I think, but the weight in which it's given is going to be different, right? And so to kind of use that lookup, a lot of that was really alphabetical skills, right? So do you understand kind of the order of the alphabet and how sounds work? Yeah. So do we still teach how sounds work? Absolutely, right? That's a basis of foundations, right? Which is used in our kind of spelling program and some of our other language arts. And May, starting in 3rd grade, will do some of those alphabetical skills, right? And so to help them use the library, within that context, right? So they're still kind of getting that sense. But we collectively might have gotten, 100 hours a year on that in 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade, right? And that was probably overkill, right? We didn't really need 100 hours a year in order to really have those skills, but we were forced to do it because there was no other option, right? So now maybe we can spend the 10 to 15 hours a year that's really appropriate to give them that schema, that framework, and now we have 80 to 90 more hours to do something else, right? And so, but it is really important, like Leslie's talking about. I think that's something that attracted me to school, and I've continued to be impressed. I think we do a good job here and being really thoughtful about making sure we're not losing fundamentals as we go through. And math is another example of, right, where we want to make sure we're kind of creating math thinkers, even though we all carry a calculator in our pocket, right? But that idea of having that math concept and that math thinking is really important, and I think we try to be really thoughtful and intentional about what those things are. And it'll change when, it is more appropriate that you're doing it because she's 5, 6 right now, right? And when she starts to be 7 or 8, you could be like, well, here, why don't you try it, right? And there's value in them still like entering their wrong spelling and seeing, oh, it was this different, they get the answer and it's gentler, right? So if I didn't know how to spell a word and I was trying to look it up, I'm done, right? But Google, where they're probably looking it up, is smart enough to be like, oh no, like you put a K, but that's really a CK, and here, look, here's still the thing you wanted, and the child can get that gentle correction and still get the knowledge that they're trying to do. Yeah.
So you talked a little bit about modeling, parental modeling.
Yeah.
The presentation, which I agree is really important, and it's sometimes hard to remember. Not to pick up the phone and compare things. But so I guess one of my questions is there, in terms of modeling on different types of devices, one of the things we try to do at home is when we look something up, I use a Chromebook. We have Google Assistant on it, which is great for looking things up because the girls can say what they're looking for, but it's not always on Alexa.
Right.
And you get, bring up a Wikipedia page, and you can click on it. It'll give you generally good information about it. One of the things I like about modeling on the computer is that it's not always with you. Like, these devices are always with us, and that the computer is in a fixed location and they can go there. And it forces me, at least, but I don't know whether the right thing or not, but it forces us to go to a location where we're looking at a shared screen that's not in our pockets. What is your view on modeling on different devices? Or once they get these, is everything you've done totally thrown out the window because these things are so addictive?
Well, I think you kind of have two separate ideas there. So I love the idea of being really intentional about what devices you're allowing your child to use, right? And so I think if, in your family, right, it's really working around computers, that can be great. The idea, in some families, it might be an iPad or some other device, but kind of having something that's not always with them is good. So I think that's great, and that kind of modeling there is great. In terms of the addiction, I think it's, one, I would encourage all of you to go through your notifications and see what you've allowed to notify you or not, and really to, and to think about what's the gentlest form of notification that I can have. So, for instance, I don't let my email vibrate me in my pocket, right? It'll show up, and I'm looking, but it's not interrupting me in whatever I'm doing. So am I still checking my email every 15 minutes? Yes, I'm still checking my email every 15 minutes because I happen to be doing something else on my phone. But again, it's not that interruption. So I guess I can't underline that enough in trying to avoid the interruption. And especially for a 13-year-old, if they get interrupted by social media, it requires immense willpower to turn it down once, and you get the third or fourth time, and they've used up that willpower reserve, and there's going to be no resisting it. So the only way to resist it is to not have the temptation in the first place, right? And so that's why you wait to get on social media in the first place. But then even once you've waited and it's appropriate, I mean, we collectively know our experiences with that, right? And so I can't underline that enough. And then one advice I have is, you don't need to go from having no phone to a smartphone, right? That doesn't need to be the jump that you made. So really think about having their first phone be, you know, a dumb phone, and they'll learn how to T9, and, you know, which is, the, you know, texting out the old, when we first got phones, right, and we have to press the letter 3 times. Like, one, the predictive algorithms are really good now, such that you don't have to generally press it 3, you can just kind of, you know, press it a few times, and then it'll figure out what words you're doing. So they're still going to be able to text you. If you want, they're still going to be able to text their friends. But one, there's a higher burden on it, right? So it's not so easy to pull it out and start texting people. And two, really all that they can do is call and text you. And so is that really what you need from a middle schooler? For a lot of them, the answer is yes. So again, you're kind of building up some of those skills so you're not throwing them into the deep end. But then it does go back to your modeling and just trying to work on it there. I think I'm fingers crossed optimistic that it's going to be easier. I mean, not for all of us sitting here, but in 10 years, 15 years, when some of those kids who've experienced it start becoming parents, they're going to have a reservoir of experience and knowledge to draw on that we don't have now, right? So a lot of our parenting is informed by what our parents did, right? And for good or bad, right? It's like, oh, I don't want to do that thing my parents did, or yeah, no, I want to kind of continue that on. And we don't necessarily have that around our devices, right? And so I think we're kind of in a gray zone where it's extra hard. And then when different age parents come through and they have different experiences, they'll have different things to draw on. So I hope that was somewhat helpful while also acknowledging it's just hard.
Great.
The only other thing I'll just throw out there
Please.
is that I was at a talk and they talked about also how your kid, like if you let your kid use the iPad, about how they use it, like holding it up close to their face and being kind of just them on the screen, whereas like ideally if you could have them watch something on a bigger screen, or at least that they're in a room with other people, like not just in their bedroom with their phone or the pad, that can't remember the exact detail, but it had to do with the social connections and the fact that kids are so connected to their screens, and that's not a person that's, you know, developing those skills. So.
The screens in the bedroom is, I mean, if anyone wants to learn from our family's mistake, because it's really hard once you've allowed something to go backwards, which we did end up doing, and it was painful, but I'm glad we did. But even my 16-year-old, that's a sacred space and for sleeping and reading and meditating and whatever else you want to do in there, but it's not a place for technology, and I do think that was the right decision.
So is she not allowed to carry her phone into her bedroom?
You have a little place they check it in, like out in the kitchen or
They can
something,
leave it
or-
in, we have an office with
Yeah.
desks, and they can leave it on their desk, they can leave it in the kitchen where we have kind of a charging station, but it may sound draconian,
No.
but
Sounds lovely.
there, you know, one of my kids told me that there are kids, must be my oldest, that there are kids who wake up in the middle of the night. So again, it's not even to text message, but it's like, oh, I should have added this to my paper that's due tomorrow, and so they're up at like 2 o'clock in the morning working on their paper because their laptop's
They
right
can.
there.
And let
Whereas
me-
if you have to like go downstairs and go across the house to, you know, it's another barrier.
And let me tell you, the research strongly suggests it's not just one kid, that it's basically any kid, that if you have that device in the bedroom, it's going to get used and interrupt their sleep and like I mean, beyond interrupting their sleep from the anxiety, right, the sleep effects of having that kind of light, even, you know, the blue light, even if you turn it way down, right, iOS makes it kind of nice to turn it down at night, but you're still absorbing some of that and doesn't do good things for your brain waves. So as they get into their teen years, that's great that you were able to do that for your family.
Set the rule early, it's a lot easier than, yeah.
So we have an iMac, but I put kernel controls on that, basically just locks it down. So they're very limited to where they actually go on the web. Is there equivalent to that for the independent technology scope of the iPad, wherever they can go? It's like carte blanche.
Yeah, so Apple has not been friendly about that. They got about a year ago they got better, and so there's something some of the better options now, including the Norden that I had mentioned before, will do what's called oh, this is my personal one, that's why it doesn't have it. But you'll install something called a profile on there, and that's really the key. So if it's going to be good on the iPhone or on the iPad, it needs to be installing a profile, because that kind of adds extra layers of security and control. And so that's,
So Norton? So
Norden
you've
will
got
install a
those
profile
down.
onto iOS. You have to do it, and it's a little tacky, and so if you need help, if you want to bring the devices in and you want me to help you walk through it, I mean, that's part of my job, and I'm here to, like, when I said I'm here to help, I'm here to help, right? And so can help you kind of install that profile. It is a little techy, but that's how we actually manage, like, the kids' iPads here at school.
You go to the App Store to get that?
Yeah, yeah, so some of them are available in the App Store, absolutely. And then, sometimes there might be a frequently they have subscription models. And so, yeah, but yeah.
Two questions. One is Apple just announced a new iPad for kids, and I was wondering if you know about what makes that better for kids than the regular iPad or anything. And then the software that you guys use here, can we use that at home? Like if we were to have our kid have an iPad, can we install this, or can we get it? And
I mean,
not use
so-
your license, meaning people.
No, but yeah, I understand. So the software we have is really commercial school grade software, and so we pay a healthy amount. I mean, we pay a healthy amount of money to have that kind of abilities, and we're using one of the cheaper options that's out there. And so the answer is you could. It's just very expensive, into the thousands of dollars, right? And so we can justify it because we have every teacher's computer, we have every kid's, iPad, right? We have a massive devices that makes spending, I think it's around $10,000, give or take, right, on an annualized basis, what we're spending. So, it's not cheap, is what I would say there. And then the other question, so wait, sorry, you would ask
About the new iPad?
Oh, the new iPad. Yeah. So the new iPad. So basically, what happened is one-to-one, right? The idea of one device for every child. That's the one-to-one. Really kind of took off about 7-8 years ago. Is where there was kind of a tipping point. So a lot of independent schools you'll see have had programs that are 10 or 15 years old. So San Francisco Country Day, for instance, has a one-to-one program that goes back that long. But it was about 8 years ago was kind of a tipping point where more and more independent schools started jumping on the bandwagon, and that's where some public schools started jumping on the bandwagon. And at that time, the options were to spend $1,500 on a PC or Mac device, or to spend $400 on an iPad. And Apple basically captured a huge chunk of that one-to-one market as it was going. And the iPad was not at that time, and it's come a long way, wasn't a good device for what schools were doing, and it arguably is still not a good device for middle or high school. So you've seen a lot of middle and high schools that wear iPads move away from them because it wasn't good. And you might have heard about that. There was a contract with LA Unified, which was a huge contract for Apple, and basically Apple had to give back all the money and pay fees because the rollout was so disastrous and didn't do what they had promised it to do. So Google kind of stepped into the void with Chromebooks, and which basically only allow you to have a web browser, right? And so Google kind of stepped in and has captured a huge percentage of the education market, and that's the first time since the 80s that Apple hasn't basically owned the education market. And so the new iPad that's for kids is really a new iPad that's trying to appeal back to schools. So they're trying to capture back the school market. So it's not really any better for kids than than what has been out there. It has kind of a price point. It has the pencil, which is great. I highly recommend the pencil for that creativity, for that note-taking. Like, I mean, that's a game changer in some ways, but I don't think it's actually any better for kids than anything else. They're just trying to capture back the market that they've lost, and I'm not convinced that they, Apple is trying to market to teachers with all of these cool features, but really the reason Google has won is that Google has marketed to people like me and said, here's how we can make your life easier, tech director, and because tech directors are the ones spending the money, that is a very, that's a compelling pitch, and so I'm not convinced that Apple's going to win back the market share because they're trying to market to teachers, and teachers aren't really making those decisions. So that was a long answer, but it gives you kind of the history there.
Thank you for your presentation.
Yeah, thanks so much. Really appreciate it.